Welcome to Gideon's Promise, the podcast with Jonathan Rapping. In the landmark 1963 decision Gideon v. Wainwright, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously ruled every person accused of a crime in America must be provided a lawyer, regardless of their ability to pay. This podcast is about the people that uphold that promise, public defenders. These dedicated lawyers give voice to 80% of the people thrown into the system, and yet in the national discussion regarding justice reform, public defenders are largely overlooked. This show centers public defenders in that conversation. We will explore the critical role public defenders play in addressing a wide range of issues facing marginalized communities with subject matter experts, key opinion leaders, and people impacted by the American criminal legal system. Listen as a community of advocates discuss their work to strengthen public defenders and transform public defense. All right, welcome everyone. I am so excited, Rap, to be back.
Yes.
This episode, this podcast episode is a special two-part series for June and July. This month, we are honoring Juneteenth by asking ourselves what modern day emancipation really looks like and what it means to truly be free in 2021. In July, we will be reflecting on Independence Day, the United States Independence Day, and asking ourselves what it truly means to be an American in light of what's happening in this country with discriminatory immigration practices. These two episodes will share a common thread of dignity, autonomy, and meaningful self-determination in the pursuit of what the United States says is life, liberty, and happiness. So please be sure to check out part 2 in July.
Yes.
Now let's talk about Juneteenth, which is short for June 19th. Juneteenth is now an official national holiday that celebrates the day that federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas in 1865 and announced the emancipation of enslaved people. Although it has been declared a federal holiday, we know, Rap, definitely there's still more work to be done.
Amen.
Because it is just, this national holiday is just the first step in an ongoing fight to emancipate our people.
So clearly the fight for emancipation is ongoing, and that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. And to join us in this conversation, we are really excited to have Alejo Rodriguez with us. And I'm just thrilled, Alejo, that you are joining us. Alejo, as you will see, is just a remarkable human being. He is the chief of curriculum and storytelling at Zealous, which is an organization that is a dear friend to Gideon's Promise, that trains and supports public defenders, teaching them to be better storytellers and messengers in partnership with local organizations and the people and communities that they serve. At Zealous, Alejo implements new and immersive storytelling strategies that shift the narrative of what justice should really look like while moving people and leaders to change legal systems for the better. Alejo is a poet, he's a teacher, he's an advocate. His poetry and writing appears in the Outlaw Bible of American Poetry and Doing Time, 25 years of pen Prison Writer Awards. Alejo's the winner of several PEN Awards. He's a teaching artist for Tribeca Film Institute's screening series at Otisville Correctional Facility. He is the co-screenwriter of a short film entitled Unbecoming, and it goes on and on and on. But I have to say, Alejo, I think the thing you do that I am most proud of now is you are the newest board member of Gideon's Promise. And so really technically you are the boss of me and Illy. And so I'm excited to take this opportunity to tell the world and to welcome you as our newest board member.
And when I want to say this is the first time we've got to actually interview our boss. So so Alejo, I'm very excited for today's conversation.
Before we turn it over to you, Alejo, with some questions, I just want to let our audience know that I think one really interesting thing to point out is, Alejo, you spent 32 years in Attica Correctional Facility in upstate New York. And what I think is so remarkable is you went in there in 1985 as a 23-year-old man. And at the time you went in, Illy was 7 or 8 years old, visiting the same institution to see her father. And so literally the two of you were in the same correctional facility at the same time. You didn't know each other, and you didn't know that 30 some years later you'd be working together to try to fight this system of mass incarceration. And what I think is so amazing is, as we talk about emancipation, you obviously have experienced what the system does to destroy individuals. Illy firsthand knows, as a child of an incarcerated parent, what it does to destroy families. And I'm just so excited to join the two of you in a discussion about how we finally realize freedom in America, something that we haven't known in 400 years.
Alejo, can you, if you don't mind sharing, if you, some of the personal experience about what happened to you in the criminal legal system, if you don't mind sharing some of that and how that experience led you to do the work you now do today.
Well, first of all, thank you all for having me. And if I may, like, this idea of being called a boss, I'm like not really comfortable with this. Can't we just be a team?
Yes,
we'll be a team. But but it is kind of a powerful title to have. So I'm gonna have to wear it on for a little while. But yeah, I just like the idea of being a team. And I'm just so glad to be a part of Gideon's Promise in any capacity that I can. I think it's just so much the work that y'all have been doing for all these years. To me, it's an honor. More probably knows I'm celebrating that I can't be on the board. So I need to just clarify that. So John, you were mentioning about being in Attica. For one, for clarification, I didn't do a whole 32 years there. I did 32 years in the New York State system, and the way things are in New York, more chances than not, you're going to be moved around at different facilities, right, especially if you've done that much time. I've lost my mother while I was in prison, so there's no way else I can think about that as being other than directly impacted.
Yeah.
My family is still dealing with that loss of not just her, but the loss of me not being there and helping to the grieving process. So there's no way we can talk about that as being an indirect partner in this. We're all directly. And we're looking at this, however, we're looking at this from the context of hindsight of understanding what mass incarceration has done. But in 1985, the sad part about it was that many communities of color was invested or supported the locking up of young black men.
Yeah, no, Alejo, I appreciate that. And you went into Attica at the age of 23. You're obviously now such an accomplished artist, writer, poet, speaker, teacher. And I assume a lot of that education happened inside. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
I when I think about what was it for me, it was this openness to look at new things, but yet at the same time, this selfishness, right? And I'm saying selfish, like it's like I had to secure me. Mm-hmm. This vision towards growth that I couldn't even really fathom the word, even though it's such a simple word, right? But I couldn't fathom what it was. I just know what I was stepping into. Mm-hmm. I know I can feel the directions that I was being led into. And that just became very, very like a guiding force. And so it showed up in my spirituality. It showed up in education, right? I made a commitment when I first went to prison. Colleges were still being funded from Pell and TAP grants in New York State. It was a TAP grant and the Pell grant. So I was able to take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. start utilizing my, my education.
Well, I have to say, Alejo, I met you obviously after you went through this experience. I teach law school at Atlanta's John Marshall Law School, and you came and spent several classes with my students. It was a class on um, race, class, and the law, and social justice advocacy beyond the courtroom. And I asked you to come help them think about the power of storytelling and why it's an essential part of advocacy. And, the thing that was immediately clear to every student was, um, I really think a message of, I hope I'm characterizing this right, hope and optimism that you gave them, that they actually could enact change. And you gave them such powerful tools and tips to be better advocates and storytellers. And I know you've invested your life now in teaching public defenders and other advocates to more effectively use storytelling to help bring about justice. And I just wonder if I could ask you to talk a little bit about why you see storytelling as just such an essential part of advocacy. And we're obviously an organization that trains, mentors, supports public defenders. Why is that so important for public defenders to understand?
Yeah, because public defenders are human beings. Sometimes we get caught up in our labels and what we do in the profession and storytelling. We're human beings. That's how we learn, through story. From children, we start with even children babbling. They're telling you something. They want to convey something, right? Hieroglyphics on walls, right? That are age old, right? Cultures who've and civilizations who've, we like to think, we're a country 200 years old and we're doing something. Like, there's civilizations thousands of years old, and they relied on verbal traditions, storytelling, to convey their heritage, who they are, challenges, wisdom. We're human beings.
Mm.
So I think the first part of that is we need to acknowledge, to really begin to not just look at advocacy, but look at what makes us human.
Mm.
I think advocacy is a word that we applied as one of these things that we do,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mhm.
Or one of the things that we can help support in getting other people to better understand, right? But the critical aspect of storytelling in regards to this work, and knew something, I'm gonna rephrase that, in regards to transforming this work,
Mm.
is not outside of us. It's not looking out of us. It's to begin to challenge us to look inside of who we are.
Alejo, I think the question I'm going to ask you has a lot to do with the answer you just gave. Obviously, one thing that we work with public defenders to sort of get better at is thinking about how we build strong relationships of trust with the people that we serve. And oftentimes, public defenders can find it very difficult to build trust with communities that have come to not trust them, to see them as part of the system, to see them as a cog in a machine that is really sort of oppressing them. But what are your thoughts? What do you say to public defenders? Um, what tips do you give them? What advice do you give them? How do public defenders do a better job at developing these relationships with individuals and getting the trust from the communities they serve that they need to be the advocates that the communities deserve?
Yeah, great question. We're talking about, most people going to prison coming from poor backgrounds, you know, we all know disproportionately, black and brown individuals. And we're talking about people who have dealt with different forms of institutions, if it's public schools, if it's public housing areas, if it's healthcare. And in each one of these spaces, their humanity is not being reinforced either. Like human-centered language is not happening in those spaces. And so in many respects, you have individuals who's in the courtroom who they've dealt with a number of very significant social institutions who has never identified their humanity. And so to do so as a public defender, um, to some people, it depending on circumstances, but to some people can be eye-opening to them, like, yo, you see me, right? And that could be one of the first, like the cornerstone, if you would, in developing a trusting relationship, right? And so there, there needs to be some dexterity, right? But the dexterity it cannot be faked. It can't be imitated, right? So the only real way for that to happen is to really step into a space where you allow yourself to listen to a person, even if you felt you heard the story 1,000 times, right? Because each individual is different, right? Um, and even if you did hear it 1,000 times, the time spent in listening to them is a time spent in developing a sense of trust. Um, because a person actually feels that, hey, I'm speaking and they're listening. They're not telling me what needs to be done. And so it begins to lay down a, um, a foundation. So listening is key, and simplifying, right? Talking to people as people.
We have to be thoughtful and think through, right, what we're doing and what we're saying. And this takes me to a question about thoughtfulness and storytelling. Alejo, I have been on panels, I have moderated, been part of it, talked to, witnessed, watched different panels of people who had direct experience, primarily people who were formerly incarcerated, sharing their stories. And it was interesting. I was on a panel or listening to a panel discussion one day, and the panelist, she mentioned that, this whole like success story concept, like stories usually have this bad thing happen and then look how great things turned out. And my question to you is, as we are educating people who have no idea what is happening really in this machine we call the justice system, do you think we need to include in stories the stories of loss, of failure, of discomfort, not just, people have been released, or people like me, people always say, oh, I'm so amazed, Illy, that you are who you are today, right? But I don't typically share all of the trauma that happened. Do you think we need to be more open and share that in storytelling for people who have direct experience?
That's a really, really good question, and I actually go back and forth with that. Um, uh, and the reason I go back and forth, one, I think it's valuable. Yes, there's a part of me that says yes because this is part of the human experience. I think too many times, I forget who said it, but we have become accustomed to think about solving life issues, right, within a half hour, an hour, because this is how we see it on TV being done, right? And so life doesn't work like that, and in fact, we learn so much of ourselves through our challenges, not always through our successes, right? And we learn um, about commitment, about resilience, about all through our challenges.
I agree. I agree. We need to share our highs, but we also need to start sharing our lows as well. So, to bring it back to the discussion of emancipation, every year in America, nearly 700,000 people are released from American prisons, and an estimated 9 million people are released from jail. According to the National Institute of Justice, almost two-thirds are arrested again within 3 years. And after being released, directly impacted people are confronted with a myriad of obstacles to successful reentry. Many aren't allowed to vote, have limited access to job opportunities and education, and are ineligible for public benefits, public housing, and student loans. So what changes, Alejo, can we implement so that freedom is more than just an empty promise?
They can remove, they like talking about, oh yeah, we do not want to exploit prison labor, right? But they don't want to remove the 13th Amendment's exception clause.
Yeah.
That would permanently, right, protect people from being exploited in that way, right? So there's some structural things, right, that's related to this, that we don't look at. We don't look at industries. We don't look at our exports and import type of our relation with other, because there's slavery. This country is involved with slavery in other countries. They're taking legitimate jobs that can be utilized in the United States because they don't want to pay people the minimum wage, and they can get it done for 50 cents in India or Taiwan, or they get done for 50 cents. So when we start, if we want to abolish slavery, we want to truly honor emancipation, let's not even get involved with slavery in other countries, not just here. Mm. Let's break our ties from it and reinvest into America. If that is the case, and a lot of these racial tensions will die down, right? So we also need to look at it through an economic lens, and then tell and then push for government to put their money where their mouth is.
To wrap this up, we started off, we talked about emancipation.
I said I got the last question, Alejo. I don't really get the last question. Illy's got the last question.
Never, I always get the last question, the last say. And for here, we talked about honoring, Juneteenth. There are many federal holidays in this country, in the United States, and Juneteenth is now our newest, right? But we don't want to just make this 1 month, 1 day. We on this podcast have been doing this work for a very long time. What can we do? How do we, and when I say we, everyone who is listening, how can we meaningfully honor the legacy of Juneteenth?
Yeah, it's more than just a day. Like, we're just acknowledging it now, but if that is the case, then it questions us of what does freedom mean, right? And then really question, and if that is the case, right, and if we're going to honor it that way, is it real that, from what we experienced, the Black experience in this country, have they really been free? And if we begin to truly grapple with those, fundamental questions, then I think it's something that needs to show up in a daily practice, in a daily awareness, right? And even if that means just learning, getting to know people, right? Stepping out of our comfort zone, right? Maybe even like some individuals may not, where would I go? How can I learn? What would I maybe go to a school board meeting, community school board meeting in a Black neighborhood? Maybe go to a community board, listen to what the issues are, right? And people would be surprised that when they start talking, even though they're Black people, a lot of them are struggling with poverty issues or other issues, that when you consider not the people saying, but the issues that are being, there's no race to it. Like, we all struggle with drug issues, with crime in our neighborhood. Like, we all deal with these things, right? And so, that's that. And systemically, you're talking about it in a broader perspective. It really is a matter of, for government to put their money where their mouth is. Bottom lines.
Yeah. So it's interesting because this theme has come on almost every podcast we've hosted over the last year and some changes. This to reform. There are structural responses there's financial responses, and the work we do is the cultural response. And all three of them collectively together can support change and emancipate our people. Alejo, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an honor. I can talk to you for 2-3 more hours, but I will get in trouble by my team. Alejo, if anyone wanted to reach out and find you, where could they find you on your, your social media handles, or where can they find you?
You can go to our website on Zealous. We have a Zealous website, and you can share with your listeners my email. If they want to contact me directly, is Alejo@Zealous, ZEALO.US.
Well, Alejo Rodriguez, the Chief of Curriculum and Storytelling at Zealous, we want to thank you for joining us today. And just in true form and fashion, this is Ilham Askia.
And this is Jonathan Rapping.
Wrapping it up.
Hey, Il, before we hit that outro, why don't you tell people how to order a copy of the book in your radio voice?
In my radio voice?
Yeah, in your radio voice.
Okay. Get your copy of Gideon's Promise, a public defender movement to transform criminal justice at Amazon, IndieBound, Beacon Press, or wherever books are sold. Pre-order today, and a portion of proceeds will help us support public defenders.
Oh, that was good. That was good.
Thank you for listening to Gideon's Promise, the podcast, with Jonathan Rapping. For more information on the topics covered and featured guests, please visit our website at gideonspromise.org. And finally, please subscribe, share, and let us know what you think.